Welcome to the Haymaker MMA Show with your hosts, Tanai and Ian Wall.
Welcome to the Haymaker MMA's Who's Gonna Win This Weekend, where Ian and I will be providing you with the picks from Saturday night. Fight card, Paul Felder against Rafael dos Anjos. We'll be picking fights to win in the prelims and on the main card. So starting with Dontel Mays versus Roque Martinez. Mays opens up at minus 230 and Martinez is a plus 184 underdog. Mays is a bigger guy with a longer reach and a record of 7-4-0, 0-2 in the UFC, and he suffered a submission loss in May. He has 4 knockouts, TKOs, and a submission under his belt. Martinez, on the other hand, comes in with big heart. He has a record of 15-6-2, which means he's more experienced. 0-1 in the UFC, but that loss was against the King Kong, Alexander Romanov, who absolutely batters people. That was a submission. And he has 8 knockouts and 3 submissions. So, Ian, what are we thinking?
Man, I'm looking at Martinez, who's a big burly boy, definitely slower on the feet, has a good amount of kickboxing experience with going up against some of the guys like Mirko Krokop and Jerome LeBanner. So he's got a good striking background, and he's primarily a striker. However, I'm looking at Dontel Mays. He's a little quicker on the feet, just has more offerings, more footwork, a lot lighter. His only losses have come in the UFC. He had 1 loss outside of the UFC that was an illegal knee. And only 2 of his 11 fights have gone to decision. And you look at Martinez, who hasn't seen the third round in his last 8 fights. His last 8 fights have ended before the third round. But going off of Dontel Mays, at 28 years old, a little younger than Martinez here, and a little faster and a little better technique, in my opinion, to win over the distance. I'm looking at Dontel Mays by TKO, and an even better bet to say that this fight does not go the distance, looking at Mays as 2 of his 11 fights have gone the distance, more of them have not, and then Martinez hasn't seen the third round in 8 fights, like I said.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was thinking about Mays too to knock out Martinez, but then I thought about Martinez's heart. Even against Romanov, he was able to survive a ton of beating, and he was fighting, trying to make his way back up to the feet and everything. So I like the fight inside the distance. I think either guy can knock each other out, and heavyweights is more likely to happen and not. That's at minus 196 fight to finish inside the distance.
And as far as 2 big heavyweights with the stats that I just said that don't tend to go the distance very often, I feel like that's a pretty good line at minus 196. All right, so next up on the card, we got Tony Gravely and Geraldo de Freitas. What are the numbers on that tonight?
So these guys are bantamweights, and de Freitas is a plus 134 underdog. Tony Gravely, minus 164 favorite. De Freitas has a record of 12-5-0. He's 1-1 in the UFC. And he suffered a split decision loss in August 2019. He hasn't fought in a while. He has 4 knockouts and 5 submissions out of his 12 victories, so that's something to watch out for. Tony Gravely, on the other hand, has a record of 19-6-0. He's 1-0 in the UFC. He's 0-1 in the UFC, and he had a submission loss in January of 2020. So it's been about 11 months for him too. 8 knockouts and 3 submissions for Tony Gravely. I'll make my pick first on this. It's Tony Gravely's last loss was a submission in January, and he's lost 5 times out of 6 by submission. De Freitas has 5 submissions under his belt. He's a solid jiu-jitsu player, and De Freitas by submission is plus 500, and I like that a lot. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I didn't have the balls to do it tonight. I was looking her up also. Both of these guys, looking back at some of their fights, elite fighters, very well-rounded. Tony Gravely's got a great wrestling game, striking game. They're there to bang. Gravely's coming out of AT&T, at an ATT, American Top Team. So he's got a great camp behind him. And I also noted his 5 submission losses. And you got the Brazilian in de Freitas, who's isn't his main source of or route to victory is submission, but he's very competent on the ground. only thing that kind of turned me off for him to really get it done in the spotlight is that he doesn't really have any big name experience. Doesn't coming out of Brazil in the regional scene in Brazil. Didn't have too many guys coming up the ranks that are people that I recognized that were bona fide fighters. However, his only losses are to Patchy Mix, Manny Bermudez, and Merab Dvalishvili, who are all in either Bellator or UFC and are very well there. So I'm with you also, but I got De Freitas by money line.
Up next is the strawweight fight between Ronda Marcos and Kanako Murata. Marcos is a plus 148 underdog, and Murata is a minus 184 favorite. Marcos is coming in with a record of 10-1, 6-8-1 in the UFC. She's already suffered 2 losses this year, a submission in September and a unanimous decision in March, but she has 4 submissions under her belt. Murata, on the other hand, this is her first fight in the UFC, so it's crazy that she's getting the favorite in this one. But she's done very well outside. 11-1 is fantastic. She had a split decision win in November of 2019, so she hasn't fought in a year. But she has 2 knockouts, TKOs, and 4 submissions to show for. What do you think about the strawweight women?
Man, like you were saying, it's hard to imagine how they're given a debut person, favorite odds coming against somebody like Ronda Marcos, who's a vet in the game, especially in her weight class. But you look at Marcos's fights and her ways to victory, and it's all really grappling based. It all comes on her wrestling offense. She doesn't win really any fights by striking output or outstriking her opponents, unless in a few cases that she was up against predominantly wrestlers who had even worse striking than she has. So if she can't out-wrestle her opponent, then she doesn't really have a clear path to victory or a confident path to victory. And then you're looking at, on the pronunciation, Murata.
Pretty good.
Yeah, right. So and she's primarily all wrestling and grappling. She's got great wrestling. If she can't submit you and kind of bully you with the wrestling, then she'll take a decision home with her. So that's how I can understand the odds here. I think Murata's a much better grappler than her. And a couple of months ago, I learned the golden rule of women betting on women's MMA. For most cases, you want to bet on the better grappler. Whoever's a better grappler tends to win more in women's MMA. Obviously, there's some other cases where that doesn't always play out, but in this case, I believe that's going to be the thing that gets it done. Murata's got better grappling, and she's going to come home with the money line victory at minus 178.
All right, so yeah, I got Murata too, but sorry, I looked at the lines earlier. It was minus 184, just a slight difference. We're both using FanDuel, but yeah, maybe it was a little different yesterday than it was today.
Some money might have came in on Marcos.
Mm-hmm. Which is good. I mean, I like Murata too.
And moving on to the next fight, we got Jose Quinones versus Luis Smolka. What's that looking like tonight?
Another bantamweight fight. Bantamweight division absolutely blowing up. We have Quinones at a plus 122 underdog and Smolka at minus 150. Quinones has a 9-4-0 record and 5-3 in the UFC. That means 8 of his 13 fights have come in the UFC. He suffered a knockout loss in March this year, and he has 2 knockouts, TKOs, plus 1 submission to show for. Smolka, on the other hand, has a record of 16-7-0. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and he also had a submission loss in May this year. But he has 7 knockouts, TKOs, and 7 submissions out of 16 wins, so that's 14 out of 16 fights finished. I like Smolka in this one. I just think he's more well-rounded. It's tough to bet against someone with a better UFC experience in Quinones, but I think Smolka is just a better fighter, more skilled on the ground and on the feet, and I think he's going to get it done Saturday night.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. I think the same thing. Smolka hits hard. He's in there to bang. He's a Hawaiian. And more than anything, he's a man who's going to fight for my money. He's going to do what the best he can to find his path to victory. His only 2 losses in the last couple of years has been to Casey Kenny and Matt Schnell, who were just out-grappled him. Dogs, and they're great grapplers. And you're not going to see that out of Jose Quinones with some offensive wrestling. You neutralize that, and I think Smolka is better in really every area. Quinones looks long and skinny, like he's got a lot of range and height on people, and he doesn't for whatever reason. Smolka's actually an inch taller, but just visually he looks lanky and rangy. But Smolka on the inside, I think, is going to give him some troubles. On the ground, really anywhere. So Smolka money line minus 146 when I looked at it.
Up next is a welterweight fight between Alex Morono at minus 200 against Rice McKee, the underdog, at plus 160. Morono has a record of 17-6-0, 6-3 in the UFC. He suffered a knockout loss in February this year, and he has 5 knockouts and 6 submissions. McKee, on the other hand, has a record of 10-3-1. He's only fought once in the UFC, and he got battered by Khamzat Chimaev in July.
Tough draw.
Can't blame him. And he's finished all 10 of his fights that he's won. 7 knockouts, TKOs, and 3 submissions.
So I'm looking at Alex Morono being a little more complete and well experienced than Reese McKee. Like you said, he's only had one kind of soiree into the octagon and got hammered by Chimaev, which, what are you going to do about that? But Morono's got a little more experience. He looks strong and thicker, and in some of McKee's older fights, he doesn't tend to do the best when he's not getting bullied, but somebody's really being aggressive and kind of getting in his face. McKee does really well if you're kind of flowing with everything and going technique for technique or flowy jiu-jitsu against jiu-jitsu. But when it gets a little uglier, I think Morono tends to thrive more in those situations, and McKee tends to do a little bit worse in those situations. So I think Morono's going to make it a little more of a brawl feeling, and he's going to come out with the victory. So I'm looking at Alex Morono at a minus 174 money line.
All right. I like the underdog in this one. I think that technical smooth flow might just help him when Morono tries to make it dirty and get inside. I think McKee's, with a 100% finish rate for his wins, I think he's a very good striker that I think he's going to land something, and he's going to get the job done. So plus 160 for the underdog, Reese McKee.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So next up on the card, we got Ashley Yoder versus Miranda Granger. Break down some of that for me tonight.
All right, another strawweight women's fight. We got Ashley Yoder at plus 116 underdog and Miranda Granger at a minus 142 favorite. Yoder comes in with a record of 7-6-0, 2-4 in the UFC. She suffered a unanimous decision loss in August this year, but 4 out of her 7 wins have been by submission. Miranda Granger, on the other hand, has a record of 7-1-0, and she's 1-1 in the UFC. She was undefeated until December 2019, where she lost a submission. She has 1 knockout, TKO, and 5 submissions out of 7 victories. So, what are we thinking here?
So, you got Granger coming in with a predominantly kickboxing background. Doesn't have much grappling to her name. Hasn't been tested too much before the Amanda Lemos fight. With her takedown defense, got a little bit more. I feel like showed some more holes in her game that we didn't see previously. Ashley Yoder's another one who doesn't have the best record to her name, but she knows kind of her path to victory. And like you said, most of her wins are coming from way of submission. Needs to get the takedowns to get it there. I think Granger coming in with minimal experience on the ground, Yoder coming in with a lot of experience in MMA and knowing how to kind of traverse that matchup. I hope I'm looking at Yoder as a nice underdog at plus 124 money line. Just for the going back to the women's MMA golden rule, I think Yoder's the better wrestler, the better grappler here. I think she's gonna find a way to squeak a decision out from Granger.
All right, so I'm going to go with Miranda Granger. I think she's strong enough to keep the fight standing. Maybe she'll get taken out once or twice, but she'll be the busier fighter. She'll land more strikes. And I think she's good on the ground. She also has 5 submissions. And I think Granger's just a hungrier girl, man. She's gonna come in and she's gonna want it more because Ashiora is 2-4 in the UFC, 6 fights already, and Granger just suffered her first loss of her career last year in December. So I think that hunger and that kickboxing skill is gonna, I think that's gonna do it for her. So -142 for Miranda Granger money line. Next up, we have a catchweight fight at 195 pounds between Brendan Allen, who was supposed to fight Ian Heinisch last week, but that fight got canceled because Heinisch got COVID. And he's taking on Sean Strickland, who's making a quick turnaround from his last fight. I think that was just 2 weeks ago. So Brendan Allen and Sean Strickland open up both at -110 even. And Allen has a record of 15-3-0, 3-0 in the UFC. He's already won twice in 2020, a unanimous decision in June and a knockout in February. He has 5 knockouts, TKOs, and 8 submissions under his belt. Strickland, on the other hand, is a vet. He has a record of 21-3-0, 8-3 in the UFC, and he obviously won last month with a dominant unanimous decision win. He has 9 knockouts and TKOs and 4 submissions. I'll break this down first. I think I'm gonna go with Brendan Allen. I think that he has a better skill set overall. I think Strickland has a slight edge on the feet, but Allen's ground game is much better than Strickland's. Allen's the hungrier guy. He's 3-0 in the UFC, and he beat Kevin Holland. He submitted him. And Strickland, I haven't seen him too much on the ground, but I just think Brendan Allen's gonna do this. So Brendan Allen money line -110.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough one. Looking at it, you got Strickland, like you said, fought 2 weeks ago. So you got to wonder.
Great.
He looks great, and you got to wonder if that helps or hurts in the grand scheme of things. If maybe 2 weeks is a little too quick. It's not like he had a 10-second knockout and received no damage. He ate a couple licks and some leg kicks and kicked back, and so that stuff takes a little to get back to feeling 100 and ready to get after it again. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I'm looking at Sean Strickland again. Let me tell you why. So I think Allen's all paths to victory come from his grappling. He's not a bad striking guy, but I think Strickland has, like you said, has the edge on the feet. And Sean Strickland has an 81% takedown defense and lands about 2 strikes per minute more than Brendan Allen does. So for those 2 things alone, I think it's a 3-round fight. I think Strickland can avoid getting taken down for at least 2 of the rounds and get some points on the feet. He's also got some big power, so even if he gets taken down, he might be able to steal a round later in the round with a knockdown or some big flurries. So I liked Sean Strickland with the FanDuel double chance, whether it's points or TKO, at +115.
All right. I like the point that you mentioned that Strickland took some damage, even though he won a convincing decision. He did stand in there for 15 minutes. It's nice that the UFC is making this fight a catchweight at 195 instead of 185 pounds. But that was going to be my main point, saying that Strickland has just fought like 2-3 weeks ago. And that's why I think he's going to come in a little tired. And Allen's going to win that fight, I think. All right, moving on. We have the experienced Eric Anders and Antonio Arroyo going at it at middleweight. Anders, the -152 favorite. Arroyo +124 underdog. Eric Anders has a 13-5 record, and he's 5-5 in the UFC. He just lost in May, a unanimous decision, but he has 8 knockouts and TKOs plus a submission. Arroyo, on the other hand, has a record of 9-3-0. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He just suffered a unanimous decision loss in November of 2019, so he hasn't fought in a year. And he has 4 knockouts, TKOs, plus 4 submissions. Ian, what are you thinking here?
I think this is another tough one. I hate to say it, but Eric Anders is getting older in years. I believe he's 33 now. He's got some good wins over the just mentioned Brendan Allen. It was 3 years ago, but and he's a guy who's just well-rounded, but not elite in really any category of it. where he's got some pretty good wrestling. His cardio tends to wane sometimes.
He's got some power too, yeah.
And he's got some power, and I think he played college football places too. So he's just got that athlete, just durable, sturdy, and strong, but isn't the most flashy or technique guy. And then you got Arroyo, who's primarily a striker, but he's got that jiu-jitsu Brazilian background. So he's got he's competent in jiu-jitsu, but he doesn't have the best takedown defense or wrestling. I think Anders might be able to eat a shot or two, and if it gets hairy, take him to the ground. I'm looking at Eric Anders by moneyline win also.
All right, I got Arroyo as the underdog, plus 124. I've seen Anders' last fight, and he just didn't look like he wanted it so much. He could have done much better. I thought he looked a little tired, too. Arroyo, I think he has, he's a good fighter. I think Anders has more power, but Arroyo is faster and quicker. He has good footwork, too. So I think Arroyo has the underdog money line at plus 124 for me.
Next up on the card, we got Kay Hansen against Corey McKenna coming out of Ireland. What do you got for this tonight?
Another strawweight fight. We have Kay Hansen as the minus 225 favorite. Corey McKenna plus 180 underdog. Kay Hansen has a record of 7-3-0, 1-0 in the UFC. She just had a submission win in June of 2020, so she's probably riding pretty high. 2 knockouts, TKOs, and 4 submissions for Kay Hansen. On the other hand, Corey McKenna has a record of 5-1. This was going to be her first fight in the UFC, which is always tough. She had a unanimous decision win in August of 2020, but that was outside the UFC. And then 2 knockouts, TKOs, plus a submission for McKenna. What are you thinking here, Ian?
So, both are a little green, a little inexperienced, but Kay Hansen, I believe, has the more experience in there. She kind of broke the seal over another tough prospect in Jin Fry. What the heck was her name? Jin Fry, yeah. And just has faced better experience, I think, going up the ranks in Invicta, whereas McKenna's over there in Ireland and in Cage Warriors with some of the more European talent, whereas you see, I think, a lot better women's MMA competition in Invicta than you would see in Cage Warriors. That compiled with McKenna's debut, I think there's going to be a little bit of the inexperience and the young anxiety or whatever, and I think Kay Hansen's going to be a little more professional and be able to get it done. I'm looking at Kay Hansen money line at minus 220.
Yeah, I completely agree with pretty much everything you said. That was a good breakdown. Kay Hansen, she's gotten over the UFC hump. She's got that first win out of the way. Corey McKenna was going to be a little anxious. It's tough to perform on those UFC lights. Hansen, just as you said, has fought better people in the previous organizations too. I like the minus 225 money line. If you think this is too high, just put him in a parlay. I like that bet a lot for a parlay.
Yeah, I'm confident to use that as a keystone in a parlay or two as well. Moving on to the co-main event here, we got Abdul Razak Al Hassan against Chaos Williams. What a first name to name your son, but tonight, let me hear it.
It's a welterweight fight between 2 heavy hitters, 2 guys who just come out the gates banging. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, minus 250 favorite, and Chaos with a K, Williams, plus 198 underdog. Al Hassan comes in with a record of 10-2. 4-2 in the UFC, and he just suffered a unanimous decision loss in July. But 10 wins, 10 knockouts, TKOs for Al Hassan. Williams, on the other hand, 1-0 in the UFC, so he's a little newer. He had a knockout win in February this year, so that's good. 5 knockouts plus 1 submission in his 10 wins for Chaos Williams. For this fight, I was going to say inside the distance, but that's ridiculous because the odds were way too high.
Yep.
I just think it is going to be inside the distance, but it's going to be Razak Al Hassan by knockout or TKO. I think he's the better fighter, more experienced in the UFC. I like that they both come out hot, so watch out for maybe a first round, second round finish, and it's going to be standing. Even though Williams has 1 submission, I don't think he loves it on the ground.
Nope.
So yeah, that's my pick. Al Hassan by knockout TKO minus 155.
I like the way you think, my friend. Like you said, both guys got some bombs in their hands, both KO specialists. Chaos Williams isn't the most technical striker at all by any means. Just lets him fly. And his TKO streak and percentages is a little less impressive to me compared to Alhassan's, considering Alhassan's been in the UFC for a good 6 fights now. And even before that, he was keeping that streak up. But now every win in the UFC is also a win by KO. Granted, that same thing applies for Chaos Williams, but there's much less data to draw from, much less UFC fights to prove himself for. I see Alhassan as a much more technical and crisper striker, throws him straighter. Chaos kind of loops him around. And I don't really think he's been tested yet. So just like you, I'm looking at Alhassan at the minus 155 by KO TKO. And I think an even better one, if you got the balls to do it, is the first round KO at plus 125. Other than that, there's not too many good-looking odds on this fight to pick from. But that plus money first round TKO, I think, might be looking good for Alhassan. So up next, we got the main event. Paul the Irish Dragon Felder, the Philly boy, feel it in my soul here against the Rafael dos Anjos, former lightweight champion of the world, trying to change his career, trajectory of his career right now. What do the numbers look like for this tonight?
Obviously Felder, the biggest company man, does the commentary, takes short notice fights, loses close split decisions with all class, and he is the man. Number 7 ranked Paul Felder at lightweight with a record of 17-5-0, 9-5 in the UFC, and as I said, split decision loss in February this year to Dan Hooker, who's dangerous. 10 knockouts, TKOs, and 1 submission for the Irish Dragon. Dos Anjos, on the other hand, is the former lightweight champion. He's the minus 210 favorite. He was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev, and Islam, unfortunately, I think, had a staph infection. But Dos Anjos, very well experienced, record of 29-13, 18-11 in the UFC. He suffered a unanimous decision loss in January this year to Michael Chiesa at welterweight, so he's coming back down to lightweight at 155. 5 knockouts, TKOs, 10 submissions for RDA. Ian, what do we got for this main event?
Man, I'm so gassed up for this. Rooting for the Philly boy. You got Felder coming in on short notice. Got the Muay Thai base. Great clinch work. And he's on a short notice gas tank, so that's something to be noted when you're looking at that. Then I look at RDA, who's always got great conditioning, is super well-rounded, but is never, elite of anything. And he's 4-1 in his last 5. And his last win by TKO was in 2015 against Cerrone. So the damage on the feet, I don't think, is going to pose too much of a threat to Paul Felder. However, like I said, he's coming in off this short notice fight, less than a week's notice. The odds for Paul Felder in round 1, 2, or 3 are plus 750. He's a dog. He's taking it on short notice. You're taking a 5-round main event fight on short notice. You're never planning on dragging into the 4th or 5th round to get it done. I think you're looking at a dangerous, angry Irish Philly boy in the first 3 rounds at plus 750. I think that's unbelievable odds. Now, to counter that, I think RDA round 4, 5, or by decision. Again, these are available on FanDuel if you have those options. RDA round 4, 5, or by decision is plus 110, which I think is also a great bet. I think if this goes into the 4th, 5th round or goes to decision, I think RDA is going to win those last 3 rounds at least, just off of conditioning alone. So I got 2 bets for this one. I got Paul Felder rounds 1, 2, or 3 at plus 750, and RDA round 4, 5, or by decision at plus 110.
So this was a really tough one for me to pick. I love Paul Felder and Dos Anjos. I think they're both animals. So good. Top lightweights. Constantly they're up there. They're fighting the best guys. I respect Felder so much for taking this on short notice. And I'm just going to ride him at plus 168 money line for Paul Felder.
I fucking love it.
For him, I think.
Let's go!
He has not been submitted a single time. He's never been finished, I don't think. And I think he has great takedown defense, although he's not been challenged by the, like the top guys. And RDA is a top guy, but I think Felder, man, as long as he keeps it on the feet, and I think he has superb striking, I think. So yeah, Paul Felder, the underdog, plus 168 on a week's notice. We're riding with the Irish Dragon, the man from Philly, man.
Come on, baby. Come on, Paulie. Get her done.
This is the plus 350 challenge where Ian Walsh and myself, Tanai Shah, will give you a bet for this Saturday night that goes up to plus 350 odds. It could be a parlay, a straight bet, maybe 2, 3, 4 legs. But it's just what we think is going to happen. We worked our asses off for this one, so we're not taking lightly at all, and you shouldn't either. Ian, give us your plus 350, man.
So start us off, I'm looking at Dontel Mays versus Roque Martinez. Like I said earlier, very rare that either of those fighters go to a decision or even go to the third round. So at a minus 196, I don't think those odds are too heavy for that. That's going to be the first leg of my parlay. Next is coming with Kay Hansen against Corey McKenna. Kay Hansen at moneyline at minus 220. Previously, like I said, just kind of better in all facets. A lot more experience. Has gotten that UFC debut out of the way with an impressive win. Next up, we got Abdul Razak Al Hassan by TKO KO. Both of those guys finished all of their fights by TKO KOs, and he's just a better, more technical striker and more experienced in the UFC, fighting more higher level guys than Chaos Williams has. So that's Abdul Razak Al Hassan by KO TKO at minus 155. And to finish it all off, you got Kanako Murata against Randa Marcos. Kanako's just a fantastic wrestler, super strong and bullies people, and Randa Marcos' best avenues to victory is through grappling, and she's not a better grappler than Kanako. So I got Kanako by moneyline at minus 178, bringing the grand total up to a whopping plus 464.
All right, I love it. I have 3 of those as well. I got Murata and Kay Hansen, both the strawweight women, at money line, minus 178, minus 220. And then I have Abdul Razak Al Hassan by knockout or TKO, minus 155. And then Julian Marquez, double chance, TKO, KO, or submission. I think he's just going to get it done and going to finish the fight like he has many of his fights. So we go up to plus 515.
This is an interesting one here tonight because the 3 that we agreed on here with Kay Hansen, Abdul Razak Hassan by KO TKO, and Kanako Murata still gets you to plus 274. Interesting that it's the 2 women's fights, but I think that those 2 fights are the more easier to predict on this card. All right, so that completes this week of Who's Going to Win This Weekend. Paul Felder versus RDA, where we gave you our picks and predictions for who's going to win this weekend for that. Keep in mind, last week's, just looking at the fights itself, we went 7 for 10, 7 out of 10. If Bozer didn't shit my bed, our parlays would have looked a lot better too. And if John Anik didn't fucking jinx us from cage side, we looked a lot better too. But hopefully we continue that forward. I think 70%'s definitely not a bad place to start. I think it's only up from there, and hopefully you guys make some money with us.